The two nags that pinballed off buses and cars and people in central London this week were frightened. They were terrified. And they made their bid for freedom. They escaped their military conscription and ran for the hills. The blooded white stallion, wounded, desperate, frightened, now facing a court-martial, or worse, the knacker's yard. How much do you care that these beasts are kept, conditioned, institutionalised, for ceremonial purposes? I ask because today LBC has heard from a whistleblower who worked with those same horses at the barracks for 2 years before leaving just a few months ago. We're calling her Kate, and Kate says that these horses were kept in inappropriate conditions inside the Hyde Park Barracks.
I saw during a winter break last year rats, not just mice, which are very common around horses, but rats. The water is often not transparent and very dirty. One of the old-time volunteers told me that several times some of the horses got sick because of the quality of the water. Also, the horses are kept in stalls and not always loose boxes, meaning that they have very little possibility to move during the day. Those horses sometimes were only out of their stalls with us, meaning that for an hour a day they would have exercise, but then they would be stuck in a stall. You also have electric cables hanging from the roof, and then they also have issues with the pipes. And there's leaks of water next to those cables.
She said she raised concerns about the welfare of animals as well as the conditions they were kept in. Those horses are so nervous, they are ready to explode. I don't think it's a healthy environment. It doesn't provide what a horse needs and the space, she said. She said that the horses are given dirty water, which volunteers told her made the horses sick. We don't need them for military purposes. No need to have a horse riding over the brow of a hill to go and attack some foreign army. We've got tanks and stuff. Do we need them for ceremonial purposes? Because if they're badly looked after and when they get the chance, 2 of them bolt for freedom. Do you care? How much do you care? Why don't you care? If you don't care, justify the conscription of horses in the military. What's the point? 0345 6060 973. Alistair Stewart is an animal rights activist and spokesperson for Animal Rising. Thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme. I wonder what you make, first of all, of what this whistleblower has told LBC about the conditions that these horses were kept in.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your programme, Tom. I was pretty shocked, taken aback to hear about these conditions. Dirty water, rats, after an hour of exercise a day. You don't have to be a horse behaviour expert to recognise this is no way to treat beings who are sentient, who feel pain, who feel pleasure. And the way the army uses them is as a means to an end. We don't need to do it. We can move beyond it as a society.
A means to what end?
Well, the army. So I served in the British Army as an officer for 4.5 years. Left about 18 months ago. The army uses horses for ceremonial purposes these days. Clearly, they used to have a military role, as you alluded to in your introduction. These days, they're used for effectively ornamental purposes. They're used as living, breathing, sentient ornaments. I've been on parade with horses in the past, and I don't think that there's any need for them. I think we can do just as well without them, and we can and should move beyond that together.
I'll put it to you, Mr. Stewart, that this is an invaluable part of British history, to have parades on horseback, military on horseback, as it was in the day. All of this plays into I can't even make the argument, Alistair, if I'm honest. I'll give up.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I've heard similar arguments from people. What I would say is that I don't dispute that using horses is part of the history of this country, but there are lots of things that are part of the history of this country that you and I and most people recognise today are morally unjustifiable. Just 5 years ago, the British government banned the use of wild animals in circuses, because we recognised that we don't need to do it, and that confining using animals for these purposes is not good for them. And it's just not good enough.
If the animals were kept in better conditions, and there's obviously a dispute with the military about the way in which these animals are kept. If they're kept in good conditions, they're exercised regularly, they're fed well, they're looked after. The people who look after them like them. The horses like the people that look after them. Some horse affection. Is that okay? Does it matter that they're used for ornamental purposes, ceremonial purposes?
I mean, the first thing I'd say is that I think as soon as we start to use an animal, use a sentient being as a means to an end, which is exactly what the army does, the military does with these horses.
They also look after them. To be fair, in this scenario that I painted for you, they also look after them.
No, I don't. I'm not disputing that. But when the framing, when the nature of the relationship is one of use, we risk becoming blind to suffering and to harm that we inflict on these horses, because it becomes in our best interests to ignore that suffering, to ignore the dirty water, ignore the rats, ignore the 1 hour of exercise they get a day, and just think, am I getting what I can out of this relationship? That's the fundamental relationship we have with horses in the army. It's also fundamentally the relationship we have with animals across society, unfortunately. Farmed animals, animals using experimentation, as well as for entertainment purposes.
Do you think people should be allowed to keep horses as pets?
I don't like the term pets. I think that the term pet it implies a sense of kind of ownership and control and domination. I absolutely think that people should be very strongly encouraged to adopt or rescue horses who are domesticated, who can't live their lives in the wild. Because I think that relationship can be a really positive one when the relationship is in the interest of the animal. When the interest of the animal comes first, just as we do with human children, that's good, that's positive, that's morally good. When the interests of the animal are subordinate to the interests of the humans who are using them, that's not good enough.
How would the animal know that? Does it matter that the animal doesn't know that? If they're looked after, who cares what the animal thinks of what the human thinks of them? We can't know that.
Yeah, I mean that's a very good question. I think this is this is something more fundamental to animal ethics and moral philosophy there. I think I'd say that we should try to understand and view our relationship with these animals in the same way that we view our relationships with human babies and human toddlers. As soon as you start using toddlers or babies as ornaments for Instagram, say, there becomes something very problematic there if we're kind of using them because they don't understand it, and it risks changing the nature of the relationship there. I say the same thing goes with animals.
Can I just bring this to you? It's literally just happened as we've been talking, Alistair. 3 tweets from the British Army on this very story. They say this: a further update on the well-being of our horses following the incident on Wednesday where some of them were spooked in central London. Every one of the horses involved continued to be cared for and closely observed. 2 of the injured horses have been operated on, with 1 transferred to an equine hospital. All our horses received the highest standards of care, and those that did not undergo surgery are expected to return to duty in due course. There are no further updates regarding our soldiers who were injured in the incident. All are expected to recover and return to duty. Once again, we thank the public for their concern and kind messages. We will provide further updates as soon as we can. End statement. I couldn't help but slightly giggle at the notion of a horse returning to duty.
Indeed. I say this as someone who served in the British Army myself. I consented to that duty. I chose to put myself forward for military service. And I gained a huge amount from it. Horses, other animals who are used by the military or by the police for other purposes by humans, they don't get that choice. And that becomes a problem.
Yeah, but you can't ask. They might like it. You can't. The problem is the element of choice doesn't exist because we can't know what consent means for a horse. And I would justify the police's use of them more than I would be able to justify the military's use of them, because the police have an effective use and need for horses.
Well, I would say that we shouldn't be conscripting, cognitively impaired humans or young babies into the army because that's not fair. Even if there was some benefit to it, the fact that an animal or a being cannot consent means that we shouldn't be using them. That's the way consent works. And we can talk about consent and moral philosophy all we like. The reality is, as you said, there is a horse, Quaker, in an equine hospital now in a serious condition. We saw another horse on Wednesday morning running through London, drenched in blood. This is what happens when we use animals for our own benefit.
Good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on, Alistair Stewart, animal rights activist, spokesperson for Animal Rising. That British Army statement that the horse has been operated on, 1 is in equine hospital, the others are expected to return to duty. You just think, right, back in you go. They're sort of clip-clopping back into the barracks, ready to perform the next duty. Come on.